I'm Carrie.
And I'm Kayla, and you're listening to the Cheat Sheet Speech podcast, where two pediatric speech language pathologists talk about how to build communication in your everyday routine.
Yes, but before we dive in, this is just a quick reminder. This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your child's speech or language, we recommend that you seek a speech evaluation from a speech language pathologist that is licensed in your state.
So did you know that the simple act of reading with your child, not to them, can boost their vocabulary, comprehension, and early literacy?
That's right. It's called shared book reading, and it's one of our favorite strategies. It's so effective that we recommend it to almost every family we work with.
So let's jump in to our chatter for today on shared book reading and define it first. Shared book reading isn't just reading the words on the page. It's about engaging your child while you read, making it interactive. That might look like pointing to the pictures, pairing words with actions, or connecting the story to their own experiences.
Yes, the first thing is while your child is learning to read or first being exposed to a book, you want to use pictures to your advantage because they're going to capture their interest.
Good point. And sometimes I see parents introducing a book kind of slowly, reading all of the words on the page. But the most important thing is to create a shared experience. So instead of like, I read and you listen, we don't want that.
Right. Yeah. So instead of make observations about the pictures and expand on what the pictures like say within the context from the story. So for instance, in Brown Bear, what do you see? Talk about the animals on the page. Make the sounds that they make and then peek to the next page while using that phrase. What do you see? Make it exciting and help the child try to figure out what comes next.
Exactly. That's a great way to make it really fun and exciting. Then you're also building that engagement and familiarity with the book. And then once it's more familiar, you could place some more emphasis on those words or even like the letters on the page. But you want to try to capture them first. So we also mentioned pairing the words with actions before. So like, for example, one of my favorite stories is Don't Wake the Dragon. You might act out the actions like you're whispering or you're tiptoeing. You could add some of your own actions to the story, like gestures to be quiet or like even lightly petting the dragon. I do that with a lot of stories that have animals in it.
Yeah, that's such a perfect story for that. So awesome shout out with that one.
Yeah, and I know it's one of my favorites because it just has all the different actions and the different sounds in that story.
But last, we also mentioned pairing that book with their own experience. So let's say you're reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar. You might say, look, a caterpillar is eating an apple. You eat apples at snack time. So drawing that connection between the apple in the book and the apple at snack time will help your child learn that new vocabulary and just link it to their world. Research really supports that linking to your world is super helpful for that vocabulary retention.
I love that. Yeah, exactly. And then this way now it's more interesting to be reading the book because it means something very specific to them. And the benefits to shared book reading are huge. So the research shows that children who participate in shared book reading build stronger vocabularies, better comprehension, and early literacy skills. It also gives them practice with conversation, like taking turns. They can ask questions and even listening in that conversational turn.
Right. Another big point is that shared book reading can start really, really early. So even with babies, it's about showing them the pictures, labeling what you see, following their attention. If they point at the dog, talk about the dog.
Right, exactly. And then if you go from babies more to like a toddler, preschool age, you can stretch it further by starting to ask some of those open-ended questions. What do you think will happen next? Or how do you think the character feels? Which is going to help them build more of that critical thinking piece and emotional vocabulary.
Right. Right. I think a question we often get from parents is, do I need to finish the book every time? Right.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is no. So what matters, like you had said earlier, is just that interaction, the quality of the interaction, not the number of pages. So even 5 minutes of engaged interactive reading makes
Mm-hmm.
a huge difference. Even your child just turning the page on a book or holding a book, that's a huge difference, and that's a great shared experience.
Yes, exactly. And I think our speech spotlight is going to start talking a little bit about kind of those early stages of holding and turning the book too. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
get into that a little bit more. But another tip for shared book reading is just don't be afraid to read the same book over and over. Kids
Right.
actually learn best with repetition. We've talked about repetition before. We're repeating ourselves about repetition now. But every time they hear it, they're going to pick up new words, new ideas, also just build independence as they go, which is going to make them a more confident reader, or those like early literacy skills more confident in them.
So to sum it up, shared book reading is super powerful because it combines language, bonding, and fun. It's one of the most effective ways you can support your child's language development at home.
Awesome. And remember that your child doesn't need you to be a perfect reader. They just need you to be present, engaged, and also just willing to make that book come alive for them.
Yeah. So that wraps up our chatter for today. Let's move on over to our speech spotlight, which, goes with what we were just chatting about. We're going to talk about literacy milestones.
Yes. So now that we kind of understand that importance of the shared book reading experience with your child, let's chat about what you might expect as their literacy skills develop.
That's right. Literacy isn't just about reading and writing. It begins with awareness. Kids first learn that print and sounds have meaning, then they gradually connect those sounds to letters and words.
Right. So we'll walk you through kind of what that progression looks like from the early print awareness all the way to blending and segmenting sounds. So, first up, what is print awareness?
Print awareness is one of the first literacy milestones. It's when children begin to understand that the marks on the page, like the letters and the words, carry meaning.
Yeah. And when do we start to see that develop?
Starts about like 1 year with noticing books and turning pages, and then that progresses until about 3 years old to include like holding the books the right way, pointing to familiar symbols in their environment, like stop and pretending to read.
So, how can parents support their child's literacy development at the print awareness stage?
Yeah, parents can support this by modeling how print works, pointing to words as you read, naming letters, talking about what you're doing. Like, I'm writing a grocery list. This word says apples, pointing out signs, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like pointing out the stop sign in when you guys are driving,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging the print that your child is noticing too. Like if they point out an exit sign, bringing attention to that
Right.
and to the other features of print in their environment. The next stage would be rhyme awareness. And this
Mm-hmm.
is your child's ability to hear rhymes, start to play around with rhymes, kind of like in Brown Bear and Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, this is a fun stage. It's usually 3 to 4 years old when kids can recognize that cat and hat sound the same at the end. They're starting to tune into those sound patterns. How can a parent support a child's rhyme awareness?
I would just start playing some rhyming games like during a
Mm-hmm.
car ride or at bedtime. So you could say two words and you could ask if they rhyme. Sometimes the word rhyme is a little bit too tricky. So you
Right.
could also to kind of offer more of a hint. So you could say, "Oh, what rhymes with dog?" And then try to give them a hint. Log, so that
Yeah.
they're starting to rhyme. You could also just like expand on a song that you already have. So let's say it's bedtime and you're singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You could just switch up the lyrics and rhyme something else with star for that.
Yeah, I like that. And then having them correct you and just be like, wait, no, that's not right. And just bringing
Mm-hmm.
awareness like, oh, it does. Well, that sounds the same. Just talking about it sounding similar and getting them aware. I love that. Rhyme awareness lays that foundation for phonological awareness, which helps with that decoding and spelling later on. Mm-hmm. So it is important to build this skill to support their literacy development.
Yes, that's a good point. Rhyme awareness is really foundational for those next steps that are going to develop, utilizing the songs and stories that already have those rhymes in it is a really great way to just emphasize, model, and bring attention to rhyming. Mm-hmm. So at around preschool age, children start to learn the letter names and the sounds. And we often we can call it like either alphabet knowledge or phoneme awareness. Phoneme is the sound awareness.
Yes, yeah. So they might start to recognize, for example, like the first letter in their name, K is for Kerry, and then begin linking some letters to sounds, knowing that M says How might a parent support that phoneme awareness?
Yeah, parents, again, make it playful. And I would also recommend making it multisensory, which means that you're using lots of different senses of the body, like movement or touch, in order to expose them to these different letter and sound representations. So you could trace the letters in the sand. You could find, like today, when we go on our walk, we're going to find all the signs that have the S on it, and finding the letters in the environment. You could also just sing the alphabet song and trying to choose ones that have like B, bat, B, so that you're tying in the sound, the word, and the letter.
Oh yeah, those are great ideas. I love the multisensory aspect to it. So help your child make those letter sound connections across different environments and contexts, and just even using those different materials will just build stronger phoneme awareness because it's going to build stronger network connections in your brain.
Exactly. That's a good point. The science of reading supports multisensory input. So reports say that multisensory techniques often enhance retention, engagement, and overall reading outcomes.
Yeah, once children start connecting those letters and sounds, the next milestone is blending and segmenting, putting those sounds together to make words, or breaking the words apart into sounds.
Right. So like blending is when if you gave the child the sounds like k, at, what word does that make? It makes cat. And then segmenting would be the opposite, where you would say the word cat, tell me the sounds in the word cat. And then they would tell you the sounds k, at.
Yes, yeah, these are huge predictors of reading success. You can model this during play. What sounds do we hear in dog? D, ah, g. I like to pair that with, like you had mentioned, multisensory. So like jumping each sound that you hear so that you can really feel that each sound is different to make up that word. Or model while you're reading a familiar book by pointing to each sound in the word. So we were pointing at the words before. Now we might point to each sound in the word and then blend it together.
Yes, exactly. And you can do this anytime, bath time, in the car, while cooking together, just using familiar words in your environment, blending, segmenting. So let's have maybe a little recap on some of the early literacy development.
Yeah. So 1 to 3 years is that print awareness. So we're learning that books have meaning, words present language, and then that rhyme awareness develops. So between 3 and 4 years, we're recognizing those sound patterns in words. After that would come that letter and sound recognition. It can come kind of in with the rhyme awareness as well, but knowing that letters represent sounds. And then once we're gaining that skill, the next skill would be blending and segmenting, which is between 5 and 6 years. And that's just being able to manipulate those sounds to build and break apart those words.
Yeah, and we can always, just another reminder when we talk about milestones, these are the milestones that build on each other for literacy development. We don't need to rush them. They don't have to happen at a certain time. There's a range. It just gives you an idea of when we can see these start to develop so that you're not jumping ahead sometimes and expecting something that might be out of range for your child. So focusing on just like playing, making it fun, and seeing how if your child is showing you some interest, maybe in letter sounds, then build on that curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that idea. Just kind of taking the child's lead, which I feel like we mention all the time. But if you kind of start something that's way too hard, that might lead to frustration and disengagement with
Mm-hmm.
reading. And we want to keep reading fun, light, positive so that
Mm-hmm.
they will become lifelong readers.
Yeah, so that wraps up our speech spotlight for today. Let's head on over to our communication countdown.
Awesome. So this week we're going to give you our top 5 shared book reading strategies. So, Kayla, you're the expert. Take it away.
Okay, so number one, which we kind of just were talking about, is following your child's lead. See what they're interested in, especially in those early stages, not jumping to reading all of the words on the page, but if they're pointing out the animals on the in the pictures, then do that and expand on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to capture their interest. Also, pick a focus. So, like the first time you're introducing a book, maybe you are focusing on all of the initial sounds in that book,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's just focusing on turning the page in the book. So, then the next time you introduce that, especially if it's a familiar book, you can pick a new focus and you're using the same book in a new way.
I love that because that's like less one pressure for the parent and less
Mm-hmm.
overstimulating for the child.
Exactly. Yeah. And you really get more of a takeaway out of that experience then
Mm-hmm.
through repetition of the same concept when you pick a focus. So,
Yeah.
number 3, incorporate movement. This goes back to our multisensory aspect, but moving the full body, especially because littles are movers. So, being able to give them the chance to bring that story to life by incorporating movement. Especially, I think, Carrie, you mentioned with segmenting sounds, you like to jump to each sound and
Mm-hmm.
then blend it together. That's just going to place a bigger emphasis on that concept when the whole body is involved, which
Mm-hmm.
leads right into number 4, again, multisensory, incorporating objects. I know you do this a lot. You pair a lot of books with like stuffed animals and stuff.
Yeah.
So trying to do that, or even like book buddies that you can find online that go with the story. You could create a sensory bin that goes
Yeah.
with the story with the different characters and pick those characters up as you go throughout the story. Helps break the story up a little bit as well.
Yeah, I love that. You could also pair it with a sentence strip too, like I see if you're working on maybe some like
Mm-hmm.
initial sight words. Those would be for our older like 5-year-olds, but starting to introduce them to some core words, and they can use that sentence strip as you read the book.
I love that. So, or incorporate objects slash visuals for that. And then lastly, you can make a song. I love this, especially in the early stages. Instead of reading the book word for word, changing it into a song, especially if it's like a familiar song that you could use, like a Twinkle Twinkle or an Old MacDonald, if it's a story about farm animals, and then kind of just changing the song to what it might correspond with the story.